Hi, I'm Greg LeBlanc, and I'm here at the Haas School of Business with Vivek Wadwa, who is a distinguished fellow at Carnegie-Mellon University, Silicon Valley campus. And also, he is the author of this new book called The Driver in the Driverless Car. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the topics that you raise in this car. Welcome, Vivek.
Thank you, Greg.
So Vivek, in your book, you raise a lot of important questions about the choices that we need to make related to the technology that's becoming increasingly real. Why do you think it's up to us as individuals, as private citizens, to make choices about the limits around technology? Why isn't this something that we really ought to leave to the policymakers?
Because the policymakers are clueless. It's not their job to decide what's good for humanity. It's our job. That's the way it's always been. Laws are codified ethics. Ethics are consensus that's built over generations very often. And ethics are what we consider to be right and wrong. So it isn't the job of the policymakers to make all these decisions. It's for us to decide what we want and to tell them. It's their job to implement, the policies that we as a society want. And this is how we vote. This is, what democracy is all about. So at this stage, where we are right now, technology is on this curve when it's going exponential. Everything, artificial intelligence, robotics, sensors, networks, medicine, practically every field there is now getting on this exponential curve. And technologies are converging and they're making amazing things happen. We can now solve the grand challenges of humanity. In other words, we can solve the problems of hunger, disease, energy, education. We can rid the humanity of the things that have held it back. At the same time, we can create killer viruses. We're going to create greater inequity between the haves and the have-nots. We could really destroy humanity itself because of the same technologies which can do all this good. So what I'm trying to do in the book is to educate people on what these technologies are and present a framework to look at them from. And the framework is, does the technology benefit everyone equally? If it doesn't, we're going to have dystopia. I mean, already if you look at the elections in the United States, look at the elections in Europe, you're having extreme views coming out of nowhere because people feel left out. People who don't understand technology are feeling disenfranchised, they're getting angrier and angrier. Now, multiply that by a factor of 10. That's what our future is all about. So it's imperative that we equitably share the technology we're creating. The second thing is, do the rewards outweigh the risks? For example, gene editing, CRISPR, which was invented here at Berkeley and at MIT. With it, we can now eliminate hereditary diseases. We can eliminate disease itself. We can create superfoods. We can do all sorts of amazing things with it. But with it also, we can create superhuman beings. We can change the human germline. We can change the path of evolution of humanity itself. Now, will we do it in a good way? I don't know. Really, it's for us to decide what we consider to be moral and ethical and what's right and what's wrong and to dictate policies. The third question is, does it create greater autonomy or dependence? Drinking and taking drugs is something we do for recreation, especially here in California, right? So to a limit, they're good, but if we become dependent on them, it's destructive. That's how it is with technologies. If you use technologies sensibly, it's good. If you become dependent on them, they take over your lives, it's destructive. So I look at the technologies through that same filter and say, what do we do with it? And I walk through a whole range of technologies, explaining what they are, what they mean to us, and how we need to think about them.
Now, specifically in the area of artificial intelligence and machine learning, I think, at least here in the Bay Area, there is a general consensus that this is a fantastic thing and it's going to expand human possibility and solve most of the world's problems. Specifically in that area, what are some of the concerns that folks in the field ought to be thinking about and concerns that they ought to internalize into their innovation?
The trouble, yeah, I agree that AI is wonderful. I mean, having intelligent decision makers is better than what we have right now. If AI, if AI could help us understand all the data, make better predictions, we can have digital AI-based doctors, a lot of good things happen. The trouble is that if we now start programming AI with the same biases we have, the worst people to be programming AI are the people in Silicon Valley, because we live in our own bubble. We're disconnected from reality. We don't understand the suffering of humanity. We don't understand the value system of the rest of the world. We have our own ecosystem here, echo chamber here, in which it's all about, we think we're gods basically over here. We think we're better than everyone else. We think that just because we're building a technology, it'll be good for the world. And no, the trouble is that, look at Uber. I mean, Uber is a prime example of it. Uber, if you look at the company's value, rotten to the core. Right? It's one of the most valuable companies in Silicon Valley, which everyone used to look up to and glorify. Rotten to the core, disgusting value system and so on. They're going to be demolishing millions of jobs. That they're hell-bent on now, taking away the jobs of drivers. Do we really want Silicon Valley now dictating how humanity should evolve? I don't think so. I think the rest of the world has to learn these things and to decide what to do with it. So with AI, today it's good, but after a while, so we could be injecting biases into AI. The same biases we have here, the cultural biases, the social biases, we could be injecting into AI. And AI applied to fake news, for example, or to eliminating fake news. Well, do we want Mark Zuckerberg deciding what we should be reading? Now, Facebook has become the dominant news source. Do we want him deciding what everyone in the world should be reading? Which is where this is headed. It's using AI that he makes these decisions. Do we want Google now deciding what websites we should see when we do a Google search, right? So our biases inject into the software. That's one thing. The second thing is, after a while, we may actually create what's called artificial general intelligence. The White House says it's 20 years away. I think it's more like 10 to 15 years away, when you're literally building the digital assistants we saw in science fiction. Samantha from Her, R2-D2. These fictional characters we saw on TV where they seemed human-like. We're going to be building software that looks like that. Alexa from Amazon is getting smarter and smarter. Imagine now taking it forward 10 times smarter than what she is right now. She'll seem human-like, right? So, and then what happens when it goes beyond that? Are we building the kill switches? Are we building the checks and balances into this thing? I don't know, because the people here are obsessed with making money. I don't trust the Silicon Valley moguls to make these decisions for us, and this is why this book is really important. And I'm trying to impart the knowledge about what these technologies are to the whole world, so that they can decide what's good and bad, and we have a greater consensus than a bunch of rich people in Silicon Valley who think that they're gods.
Well, thank you, Vivek. There's certainly room for thought in the area of policy and law, regulation, ethics around AI. Right. Thank you for coming in.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.